Okay, and we're on. Yes, so as a reminder to everyone, this is being recorded and will be posted online. Um, on the agenda, starting off with administrative stuff, next call is scheduled for March 12th. Um, if there's anyone, like, are there any particular conflicts for March 12th for anyone?
1 second, checking.
Okay. So, yeah, so I think we can go ahead and keep the scheduled call for next time. Otherwise, regarding the face-to-face, I sent out invites for industry, a bunch of industry folks. Today, we'll see what the turnout will be and what will be the responses. I think I have sent invites as well to everyone who's the regular here, but if you haven't received one, please let me know and I'll rectify that.
Sorry, when's the next meeting again?
So the next meeting is March 12th. So 2 weeks from now, same time.
Okay.
And then I sent out invites for basically for the first day of the face-to-face earlier today for April 2nd in the Bay Area. So basically sent out RSVPs for folks. For industry folks, everyone who's a regular here should be, should also be on an invite list. Okay, and I think that with that, we can move on to proposals. And we have on the agenda today one proposal from Vivek about browser ablation. So, just before that, in terms of scribing, I can probably scribe for the first part, but I would love someone to scribe on the second part of the call, where I'll be talking about timing allow origin and why things are bad. So
I can scribe if you want.
Okay, thank you.
One thing to note about face-to-face, it appears that a lot of people are reevaluating hosting any sort of a event where people gather from international locations due to the coronavirus situations. So
yeah, obviously, if there is some sort of restriction on travel, that will have an impact. I think that right now we can plan on it not being there and then see how things evolve. But obviously, if there's a health risk, we will have to replace it with some online conference thing.
And I guess, would we be able to ensure that people that want to participate remotely are able to do so?
I will verify with the venue to make sure that this is an option.
How many people are coming from Canada?
I don't know. Why do you think Canada?
What's wrong with Canada? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Well,
Why
no, I
Canada
mean, basically anyone who has to cross a border might be reluctant to do so.
I will be crossing a border if I can.
If you can, yes.
Yeah, and I think there are other folks that are not U.S. based, but I haven't looked at that dimension of the list of people, but I can take a look and see if that. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, travel ban and other forms of travel restriction may expand in the coming month. So I think we might need to monitor the situation.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of that, you have, but in the US, the CDC, said that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So the situation can change drastically, even within a week.
Right. Like, for example, like immediately week before that plan face to face, I would be in Paris. Who knows by then whether what the situation will be in Paris, for example, right? So
Yeah. Okay, I think that for now we can take the wait and see approach and hope for the best, and then we'll see if if the CDC's when is before or after the event. But yeah,
I expect WFC to announce that they are canceling their AC meeting in Seoul next week. So the AC meeting is scheduled in May, but given the situation right now, I expect us to cancel it next week.
okay. Okay, so I don't know, maybe I can run like I think it's too early. We should probably define some point of decision in a few weeks to see how things go. For now, the US seems to be a relatively quiet place on that aspect, so I don't know.
So one recommendation here is to invest and investigate what we can do online, even just as a backup option, right? Let's say we cancel the actual, if we have to cancel the event, one option is to defer it entirely. Another option is to investigate if we can actually just host an online version of it, maybe in a slightly different format. So we should run through those. And also another option is maybe it is the case that some people are unable to travel due to the ban, in which case we have reduced in-person participation, but then we need to have really strong video capability to like get people into the conversation.
Yeah.
And
I think the situation is not just the possibility that people may not be able to travel, right? Like there's also the very serious, like realistic scenario in which maybe one of them would having been in contact with somebody who's contracted the virus, in which case we might spread the virus, and that would be a very irresponsible thing to do. So I mean, obviously that probability is very, very low, the current state, but I think we have to monitor and then reevaluate the situation as the meeting approaches.
And we're working on a set of guidelines for switching from in-person to remote. One of the things that we recommend, by the way, or that we will recommend, is consider, instead of doing a 8 hours or 9 hours block, is to chunk into smaller blocks over a few days.
I mean, we already do that with bi-weekly meetings, right? The face-to-face
Correct.
is
Yeah,
the
but I
opportunity
think
to have like a larger chunk of time where we can
Yes.
have a
Yeah,
more
but
in-depth discussion.
theoretically, I can imagine us, instead of doing 2 days of physical presence, we can have 4 half days.
Yeah.
In ways that can be inclusive to various time zones. So even if some people have to stay through their late evenings or their early mornings, it's just 4 hours. It's not 8 hours. I think this is this could be an alternative, but
Yeah, I mean, I think another consideration is to like a situation like a lunch, right? Like eating things in a group with everyone involved is also raises the risk of contraction, because the way most of the virus contract, or at least this virus contract, is through the droplets. So if you're eating and talking at the same time, it's a very good way to contract the virus. So.
Okay, yeah. So I agree. We need to monitor the situation and see how it goes. And if needed, we can figure out an online alternative. Um, okay. Anything else on that front, or we can talk about ablation experiments? Okay, Vivek,
All right.
take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, so the proposal is, I believe, linked in the notes, but I'll talk a little bit about motivation and mechanism and then open it up for discussion. The motivation has been that a lot of our conversations with major sites and partners, as well as folks I'm sure in this group, have had discussions with teams that are looking at investing in improving speed or at least curtailing the degradation of speed on their site, especially as they kind of have a lot of business pressure to meet deadlines, to launch new features, to handle Christmas sales and things like that. And so we're kind of always in this struggle of how do you justify investment of headcount, engineering resources in the work necessary to actually deliver really fast sites. And understanding what the right magnitude of that investment should be relative to where you are in the kind of performance spectrum. There's also a lot of variation that we've observed between sites. Some sites are very sensitive to kind of a first contentful paint experience. They want to get sort of photos or media-rich content. Shopping sites want to get beautiful imagery of their products in front of the user to entice them to engage more. Whereas other sites where there's a little bit more interaction are more sensitive to things like first input delay and CLS. And so I think understanding both what the motivation is for an individual property to invest in speed and also customizing that understanding for individual site characteristics is kind of the focus here. The specific mechanism, when there's details in the proposal, is essentially a very relatively simple mechanism in the browser, but intended to be exploited in a more sophisticated way by analytics providers, hosting platforms, and also the more sophisticated sites. The mechanism in the browser is primarily focused on getting ablation, which is to say artificially inserted delays, as close as possible to the actual metrics so that the correlation can be more closely established. So rather than inserting arbitrary sleeps in your JavaScript code, we would actually just go ahead and have the browser intentionally delay the first paint or intentionally delay first input and provide kind of that experimental basis to say if your FID score is a little bit worse, here's the impact it has on your business metrics. And so the ablation, there's a couple of different mechanisms there for specifying what ablation values should be either in a header or in a tag. And we can discuss kind of what makes sense there. But the idea is that an analytics platform would be able to, or a hosting platform would be able to insert ablation values either temporarily or on an ongoing basis to not only measure where a site is in terms of the speed metrics that we are measuring, but also how sensitive the site's individual business metrics might be to the various speed metrics and be able to tell kind of a customized story for that page about where they should be investing and to what extent. So that's the overall mechanism, and there's details in the explainer. So yeah, we'd love to get folks' thoughts on the proposal.
So this API is basically ability to add an artificial delay to the metrics being measured.
So it's not just adding it to the metrics, it's actually adding it to the user experience. So it will be reflected in the metrics. But the idea is to kind of wiggle the metrics a little bit and see what happens on a statistical basis in terms of user response.
So you're saying that this will literally delay the initial painting?
Yeah, it would actually, when you're doing an ablation study, you apply a change, you kind of worsen something by a small measure for a small group of users to see how sensitive the metrics you care about, like conversion rates, are to the to delays in performance. We can't artificially speed something up, so we're constrained in the direction that we can move when doing these experiments. But it's intended to be a small change for a relatively smaller group of users. But that will be up to the analytics provider or the individual site to decide for themselves. We're not expressing an opinion on that in the API here.
And what's the reason why this needs to be done in the browser?
So some of them can be done, it can be simulated in script, but some of them are, there's two main reasons. One is, for example, if you want to delay, loading of the first JavaScript payload, then that's something that can't be specified or simulated in JavaScript itself. And the other one is that some of these metrics are difficult to affect directly in measurable ways through script. So if the browser is able to actually just delay certain events that the browser already owns and is responsible for, then we can say, when you specify 50 millisecond delay to first paint, the browser will actually delay first paint by 50 milliseconds. And that kind of one-to-one mapping helps with the statistical validity of the experiment and reduces the amount of ablation that you need to apply to get good results.
Any chance you could go through some of your experimental setups when you're dealing with memory private footprint and talk a little bit about how you're actually experimenting and using this in practice? Thanks.
Can you repeat that? That wasn't very clear.
I just had a question about memory private footprint and how that is being used in experimental setups. I mean, I'm assuming you're using that to kind of check for memory pressure, but I just would like a little bit more detail about how it's actually used.
Yeah, so I don't have the full details. I know that we've internally done some ablation experiments on memory footprint and found engagement impact that way. I don't know if Ilya or Yoav have details there, but we can definitely go and get more details on that experiment and bring it back to the group. That's of interest.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because it seems like it would be pretty easy to map to actual other performance testing stuff that we're doing as well. So I'm just interested in any other details. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last bit.
Yeah, sorry, this is a new setup for me. I'm just more interested in details for that, but there's no other real follow-up, so let me know if you can share anything else.
Yeah. I think that the main points of feedback, and this is helpful, is to understand, what aspects of performance make sense to make possible by this experimental API. If folks are interested, like you said, in memory footprint, in loading of JavaScript, other things that might be relevant to CDNs. If there's certain areas that we want to explore the browser assisting in providing really solid ablation values for, then that's something that we can add to the proposal.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we'd be interested in both browser stacks and JavaScript stacks, like separating out browser memory from the JavaScript environment. So if we could kind of toggle between both of those, that would be helpful.
So that was, you're interested in separating browser memory from JavaScript memory? Did I get that right? Or Benjamin? Did you say you're interested in separating browser memory from JavaScript memory?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it would be nice to have, but I'm just curious to see in practice how this is being used. And when I envision it being used at Mozilla, that's one of the things I would think that we would want to do.
Okay. They're saying that Nick is not on the call. I don't know if any of the like industry folks are like, do the industry folks have any thoughts? Stephen, Jill?
Yeah, I was thinking. So for us, for Salesforce, I don't think it would be a useful API for the use case I'm aware of, because we don't have a conversion metrics like you know, a retail website would have. You know, people use our software to do their tasks. So, you know, if we delay their user interaction, it would be hard to know what's going to change, other than they're going to be more unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
you have
also,
on the Discord link that was sent by, I think, Vivek. There was a comment about from Nick Jensma, and he say, we think this proposal could be useful for a CDN like Akamai. So from the link from the document, there's a link to the Discord website with the proposal, and Nick posted a comment. Sorry.
okay, thanks. And I agree with your comment that without measuring, like without the measurement of conversion metrics or some sort of other business metrics, this will not be very useful on its own, because you're just, yeah, inflicting pain without measuring the results of it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the intent is to treat kind of the speed metrics as the dependent variable. They're usually not, they're usually the output, right? But if we change them as an input, we need some new output variable to then observe as results. And so I think this is intended for analytics providers that have that other variable in terms of conversion or add to cart actions, things like that.
Yeah. Jill, any thoughts from your end?
About ablation?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I think for us, it could also be useful for even synthetic testing, figuring out the effect of certain things on the ladder metrics. Yeah, this is definitely something we would play with, because we've been talking about many years about trying that out in production, you know, starting things out on purpose to reproduce these older studies that some folks have done. And this will certainly make it a lot easier to do things like that. So, thumbs up for me.
Okay. Anyone else with thoughts or comments?
Hey, Gilles, it's Steven.
Gilles, it's Steven. I'm just curious, for the case of Wikipedia. So you would add a delay, for example, for 10% of your population, and what you'd be looking for after? You'd be looking at if there's a drop in number of page visit, or
Yeah, drop in page views and session length. I mean, this is like, it's challenging for us to come up with good engagement metrics, but you know, this is the best we could come up with: page views and session length, really. For our situation.
How would that experiment help you tune your product, your solution, your website? Like, if you learn that, okay, if it's slow, you know, there's less page view, how are you going to improve the perf?
I think if we can apply it to a lot of different metrics, what would be interesting, what might come out of it, is that some might be more important than others. Like, for example, first input delay is fairly new. We don't know how important that is. You know, we're going to start measuring it. It doesn't apply to every page, but you know, if you start playing with these and being able to make them worse, you might realize, okay, instead of spending all our efforts on making faster paint, maybe it's actually a lot more reward to focus on events and first input delay. So for us, it would be a matter of directing our focus and resources better. We can't make, like, increasingly, we have more and more engineers pushing features, and we have to make tough choices about what we care about. And at the moment, I couldn't really say which performance metric matters most, especially since a lot of them are codependent. But this might help figure that out, like in the long list of raw performance metrics we have, to make better sense of which ones matter the most. With organic data, we can't really get that. It's, and like, I think this would be useful because you could really explore some more extreme scenarios as well, where one is really bad but the others are good, which might not necessarily happen in the field naturally, or you might not get enough samples for these situations to know if they matter. Like, for instance, recently there was someone, I don't remember who, came up with yet another meta performance metric where instead of looking at individual times, they're looking at the amount of times that things changed. Like, if you think of the load experience being sometimes everything appears at once, and sometimes it's like several steps, and like, does that matter more? Avoiding many steps, and maybe at the cost of a later paint. And with something like this, you'd be able to explore such scenarios, I think, like delay, maybe the second or third part of the experience, and then seeing, like, does that matter more than the very beginning, and so on. I think it would be useful to make some sense of the weight of each of those steps in the user experience and how it impacts engagement.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a helpful use case. So you're talking about, like, within a multi-step flow, applying ablation only to certain steps as a way of prioritizing which step you should be optimizing and investigating. Yeah. But I'm especially interested in seeing the effect on metrics that are not codependent, like first input delay and first paint should not be too related. And for us, it's really important to figure out where we need to spend our efforts. It's very different approach for us to try to improve one or the other, because we have a lot of diversity in our content. And we even have our editors can include custom JavaScript on pages, so it's really a jungle. And like, while it's kind of easy to focus on just making pages appearing faster, but maybe it's actually a waste of resources, and we should be better focused on fixing those extreme scenarios. Like, something that we've been talking about for many years as well is, like, should we focus on improving the median, or should we just look at the extreme scenarios, like maybe that 0.01% of users experience, but maybe that makes them leave. And something like this would allow us to have more data, because by definition, the extreme doesn't happen very often. And so maybe you don't have enough data to draw those conclusions, but if you can trigger the extreme for more people, then you can figure out, okay, like, this is really a situation we need to take care of. This is the threshold beyond which people are disengaged. And at the moment, it's very hard for us to figure that out. I think something like this might shift the focus from looking at the higher percentiles, the more unusual cases, instead of always trying to make the median faster, which to a degree happens itself due to the internet getting faster. So maybe it's, again, not, like, this is what most people tend to focus on, but it might not be where most of the rewards could be. So, yeah.
Thanks. Anything else? Any other comments? Or can we move on? Okay, so thanks, Vivek. I hope this was useful.
Yep, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Okay, and now I think the next item is under the banner of resource timing and timing allow origin. We have 3 issues that we briefly talked about last time. Nicholas, could you take over describing?
Yep.
Thank you. So we have 3 issues that we briefly talked about last time, but generally there's, I think, some fundamental issues here with the timing allow origin that we'll need to explore very soon. So one of them is related to the next hop protocol, which so if we look at issue 221 that was opened by I'm not 100% sure if it's opened by the ping or opened by folks who are in the ping, because but basically it's the next hop protocol exposure is like there's issue 221, and then beyond that there are other issues that I've seen that are related to the fact that the next hop protocol is currently not tau protected at all. And this seems like something we need to fix. I have a pending PR for partially protecting it for iframe resources, but I think that the right approach would be to fully protect it. And basically only expose it if timing allow origin is is an opt-in on the resource. And so that would be like the PR is 224, but I think I can obsolete it by one that tau protects next hop protocol in its entirety. And beyond that, there are basically, I think the fundamental issues is that timing allow origin is not necessarily the right opt-in for some of the things that are exposed under resource timing. Because right now we're talking about something like CORP, so cross-origin resource policy, as something that will be the gate for which we are allowing, for example, pages to measure their own memory. We talked about the memory measurement API at the face-to-face back in June. And the current proposal is to gate that on basically pages that are restricting themselves to not read any non-opt-in information into the same process as the renderer. And basically exposing transfer sizes has very similar characteristics to the information that, for example, memory, like memory measurement can expose. Both of them, like the risk we're running here is exposing the size of credentialed resources. So it seems we would need to modify some of the opt-ins, and there's still work to be done in clarifying exactly which characteristics of each of the entries we expose fits which opt-in. And there's work to be done to make sure that we already started work to make sure that timing allow origin is basically timing allow checks will be implied by CORS opt-ins. And I think we can also claim that they should be implied by CORP opt-ins. But the flip side of that is that some of the information we're currently exposing using timing allow origin doesn't really fit the risk model of timing. very well. If that makes sense.
On the side, you have Conrad is part of the ping group, so this is a comment. The we in easy issues is the ping group.
Yes, I also heard from other people that were on that same call that this wasn't a group decision. So I don't know, but it doesn't really matter.
So
the concerns they raise, or some of the concerns they raise, are real, and we should address them.
So what are those concrete concerns? Where can I find the list?
So there are so there's issue 221 regarding Next Hop protocol, indicating that it may expose whether basically exposing the protocol can tell if the visitor is using some layer 7 terminator along the path. So can tell things about the user, like they're putting an example of a proxy. I'm guessing like there are other ways in which, like, if a user is in a network that has some sort of an MITM terminator or antivirus or whatnot, there are cases where Next Hop protocol can reveal details about the user's network.
Well, so that's not really a cross-origin issue, right? Like, I mean, it would be.
This is not a cross-origin issue. I agree that the concerns that they raised on that front is not a cross-origin issue. I've seen other concerns that are a cross-origin issue around service workers and
So what are those concerns? I think in order to have any sort of discussion, we need to have a like list of these issues. Like, I don't.
Yeah. So the concern that I have seen is around telling whether a service worker is installed or not on a cross origin by creating an iframe to a resource on that origin, and then inspecting the Next Hop protocol. We had an issue with that with worker start in Chrome a few months back, and the same seems to apply to Next Hop protocol on like which raised the question of Tau opt-in or opt-ins in general.
Sorry, so service worker case, you're saying that, so you have a top level domain A.com and loads the subframe in like another domain, like let's say B.com. You're saying that A.com can detect that B.com has service worker? Is that the problem?
So if B.com has an intercepting service worker, then the Next Hop protocol would have a different value in that case, which, yes, can tell A that B has a service worker installed.
So, okay, all right. So this would be a problem only if the service worker registration was not partitioned, correct?
That is potentially correct. And a lot of the issues that were raised by the ping go away with double key caching. But theoretically, you could. Yeah, I guess that partitioning makes that specific concern go away. Yeah.
So I think if the A.com had some random image from B.com, I don't think in that scenario service worker starts up, right? Is that a thing? Like,
if the random image is loaded through an iframe, it does. Like,
but if it's not through iframe.
Yeah, if it's a sub-resource, it goes through a service worker. If it's loaded as an iframe, so a nested context, then it's loaded through B's service worker. I agree that in the partition case, the leak would be significantly smaller, as that would be, you know, you will only.
Hold on. Shouldn't there be no leak in that case? Because
there will be, yeah, I agree. There will be no leak in that case.
Well, I guess that you could still detect that the website has a service worker if the service worker registration did happen in iframe. But I think there's presumably no information leak there because, like, whoever wrote that website can just check it out, and then I guess that there's some sort of authentication, like something like a client certificate that authenticate a website.
So I don't know about like client certificates. I don't know if they have an impact on Next Hop protocol.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is, like, if the client certificate's involved, and let's say the website only registered as service workers in the case where the client certificate is pleasant, or like any user password pair, in that case, it could still detect that the that has happened cross origin.
Yes, that doesn't sound like something that I'd expect websites to do.
Right, and then that, I mean, that wouldn't, basically, this would not help. Like, basically, you can still detect what the website is doing if that website's behavior depends on the things that browser would send to cross-origin iframes within, like, regardless of partitioning.
Yeah. Yes, so you could, you could detect if a website has a service worker, but that's presumably not extremely sensitive information, as it's typically public knowledge, unless, there are very specific cases.
Right, well, unless that presence of service worker is predicated on some sort of user login and so forth.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing, so if we have a resource inside an iframe, we don't report that as sub resource, right? Like that would be
no, we do not. No.
iframe. So I think the only thing is that the iframe itself that could expose the presence. I guess another scenario is if there's some sort of like a corporate site scenario where iframe is loading that corporate site in the intranet somehow. That could expose. But I mean, that you could already do that, right? Because I mean, I think is that possible? Yeah, I guess you could check whether load event happens or error event happens externally. Oh wait, do we block the load or error event in cross-origin case? I think we may block that.
The load event for iframes in cross-origin cases?
Yeah.
If you have, that would make some people very happy. If you successfully block that, so that's super interesting.
Yeah, but I think we do fire right now, right?
So right now it fires, and I would have expected a lot of web compatibility issues with not firing that.
Yeah, so I think that information is already leaked.
Yeah. Okay, so so right now so there's the Next Hop protocol example, and then there's the general history leaks that were described by the ping. They have multiple scenarios there. Most of them go away with partitioning, except for one of them that is extracting information about cookies being sent. If we look at issue 222, so that basically the current exposure of transfer sizes for credentialed resources mean that the length of cookies can potentially be deduced, and then various things can be concluded from that, including like whether the user previously logged into the site. Maybe sites have different cookie lengths for like in different scenarios. So that part seems like for like in order to protect that, the ping folks suggested basically blocking wildcards for timing allow origin, which doesn't make sense and doesn't solve that issue. But I think that something that some mitigations that may be interesting would be to somehow modify the definition of transfer sizes to exclude cookies in ways that make us comfortable that this is not a serious exposure. Alternatively, and the part that I was alluding to before, maybe transfer sizes is not something that should be blocked on timing allow origin, but something that should be blocked on something like corp, because one of the complaints is not just this particular issue, but the fact that between resource timing L1 and L2, the opt-in remained the same, but we added a bunch of attributes which expose different dimensions of the resource. So it's not just that we added more timing attributes, but we added more dimensions that indicate the resource size and protocol. And I think this is the main new bits of information, but it's different things than just the timing. So does that make sense to everyone? And
yeah, I guess first we should ask, like, do people agree that getting rid of tau star is the wrong solution there?
It doesn't seem like it actually solves the root problem, right? Like you're trying to solve one problem with something orthogonal to it.
that would be my description of the solution, yes.
Well, so for transfer size problem, perhaps, but I think they're like he's also raising a couple other issues, right? I don't know if the removing the star will be the right solution for other ones, but I don't think.
So
I can say that one way or another.
So the issues that they're raising are one, that the main lookup start and end expose the DNS cache information, which partitioning will resolve. Then HSTS information is something that's already exposed with access control allow origin star. So blocking tau doesn't seem like, as long as you have a single resource on that domain that has access control without origin on it, which should be all of it if it's you know, web exposed. That's not something that will, like, blocking tau will not help you at all, and we'll need to figure out some other way to block that. And I think that Safari has a bunch of protections on that specific front. And then extracting reused connections, again, partitioning just solves that. And the only left piece of, like, the only left issue that they have is that information about cookies can be extracted. And because timing allow origin enables us to get the resource sizes of credentialed resources. So blocking tau star will not solve any of these problems. Does that make sense?
Okay. Just claiming that the only issue that is actually an issue about this, sorry, of the all four things it is that you're saying, claiming that the only issue we have to look at it is the cookie issue.
Yes, I'm saying that everything else will be resolved by partitioning in all modern browsers very soon. I'm assuming here that partitioning in other engines includes DNS and network connections. Is that a safe assumption?
That I actually don't know. I have to check back. That would be.
And is Benjamin still? No, he dropped off. Okay. Okay, so yes, my assumption is that the first, like, issues 1 and 3 are irrelevant in a world where DNS and network connections are partitioned. I know that that's the plan for Chrome to be deployed, like to be shipped very soon. But it's worthwhile to verify that this is indeed also the case in Safari and Firefox. And I would claim that if it's not the case, then this is the solution rather than applying tau star. And assuming we have agreement on tau star being the wrong solution, do we have general agreement on making sure that cookies are not included in reported resource sizes? Can we agree that this is potentially the right solution, unless there are extra opt-ins, maybe? Or is that something you want to take back and review? Ryusuke, Alex, opinions on that front, or?
Yeah, so I think the DNS cache extraction sorry, I'm having to think about this more. I think that is an issue. It doesn't matter cross origin or same origin, right? This will be an issue. We don't want that information to be exposed. Same thing with the HSTS, and the same thing with the reused connection. So we have to, I mean, so I guess the one thing is that there's a privacy aspect of people using this as a way as a tracking vector. Of course, the page bits is in a single session. I think in that case, removing the tau star is not gonna help, because what they're gonna do is just add a tau everywhere, and then they will just track that. So I don't think removing tau star would help that either. So yeah, it does seem like that removing tau star is not gonna really do much here.
Okay. We're out of time, but could you potentially take an action item to look into the proposed mitigation here, which is to eliminate cookies, and so cookie sizes from the request and set cookie sizes from the response, or no, the request is not exposed, but just from the response, eliminate the set cookie headers from the reported sizes in order to tackle that particular issue?
So it does look like that we don't implement transfer size, right? It's because of that security issue.
So, okay, so this is why you're not, like, if we will resolve that, will that unblock transfer size from your end?
I don't think that was the only issue. There are a couple other issues that we were tracking for transfer size. So I don't remember all the issues off the top of my head, but I think good. This
yeah,
might be the new issues that we have to figure out.
That's fair. If you could maybe, like, would it be possible for you to maybe come back to either the issue or somewhere else with a list of your concerns around transfer size, so that we can see that if we will to change opt-ins in some way, it will address your concerns?
Well, yeah, sure. At some point, I should be able to. I just can't promise if I can do that by next meeting. But
okay.
I will try to gather information. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Thank you, Yoav.
Thanks.